Imagine standing inside a sensory deprivation chamber, completely isolated from the modern world. There is no light, no wind, no touch. There is only a single, pure acoustic frequency humming through the dark. At first, your mind tracks it like a ticking clock, registering a beginning, a middle, and anticipating an end. But as the minutes dissolve, a strange psychological shift occurs. The sense of a past slipping away vanishes. The anxiety of an approaching future ceases to exist. You are no longer moving through time. Instead, time feels like an immense motionless ocean, and you are simply floating at its center. For a brief, staggering moment, you realize that the rigid timeline you have lived by your entire life might not be an absolute truth of the universe, but a psychological construct, one that can be entirely dismantled by a wave of sound. We have been conditioned to view time as an unyielding arrow, a strict progression of cause and effect, marching from yesterday into tomorrow. We measure it, ration it, and fear its passing. Yet modern physics suggests that at the most fundamental level of reality, this strict linearity is an illusion. The past, present, and future may all exist simultaneously in a vast, interconnected fabric. If our everyday minds cannot perceive this structural wholeness, it is because our brains function as filters, tuning out the infinite to help us survive the immediate present. But what if certain ancient cultures discovered a back door through this perceptual filter? Across centuries, fragmented records speak of precise resonance patterns used not for music, but for alteration, sonic keys designed to shift human consciousness out of its sequential prisons. When we examine these acoustic anomalies, we find ourselves standing at a dizzying intersection where advanced neurology meets ancient mysticism. To understand how a sound could alter our relationship with reality, we must first look at how the human brain constructs the concept of a second, a minute, or an hour. Our perception of passing time is heavily reliant on internal biological rhythms and neural oscillations. When our brain waves are dominated by high-frequency activity, we are hyper-focused on external tasks, cataloging events sequentially to navigate the physical world. This is the state of survival, where time feels fast, scarce, and strictly linear. However, when the human nervous system is exposed to specific, sustained acoustic frequencies, a phenomenon known as entrainment occurs. The brain naturally aligns its own electrical impulses with the rhythm of the external sound. By introducing a precise, unwavering frequency, we can gently pull the brain down from its frantic sequential processing into deeply synchronized states. In these states, the neural networks responsible for tracking boundaries, separation, and sequence begin to quiet down. When the internal clockwork slows to a crawl, the rigid boundaries between now and then start to blur. Neurologists have noted that during profound states of acoustic immersion, the parietal lobe, the region of the brain that creates our sense of spatial orientation and distinguishes the self from the external environment, shows a marked decrease in activity. When your brain can no longer define where you end and the room begins, it also struggles to define where the present moment ends and the memory of the past begins. The sequence fractures, leaving behind an expanded state of pure awareness. This brings us to a compelling historical paradox. Long before the advent of modern electroencephalography or neurological mapping, ancient civilizations were constructing monolithic architectures, explicitly designed to manipulate sound. If you step into the subterranean chambers of the hypogeum of Hal Saflieni in Malta, or stand within the resonant cavities of the Egyptian pyramids, you are not just entering a tomb or a temple. You are stepping inside an acoustic instrument. Many of these ancient structures share a bizarre commonality. They are precisely tuned to resonate at frequencies around 1 to 10 to a 1 in 11 hertz. When a human voice or a ritual instrument sounds within these spaces, the architecture amplifies that specific tone, creating a crushing, immersive field of resonance that saturates the listener. Modern testing of these exact chambers has revealed that the 111 Hz frequency specifically dampens activity in the left prefrontal cortex, the exact seat of our logical, sequential, time-tracking mind, while shifting dominance to the right hemisphere, which processes holistic, non-linear, and timeless experiences. It is difficult to dismiss this as mere coincidence. The builders of these ancient monuments were not acoustic amateurs. They were master engineers of human consciousness. They understood that by trapping a person within a specific geometric resonance, they could temporarily liberate the human mind from the tyranny of the chronological sequence. In these spaces, initiates did not just listen to a sound. They entered a doorway where history and destiny collapsed into a singular, eternal point. This realization forces us to confront a deeply uncomfortable psychological conflict. If our perception of linear time can be so easily disrupted by a simple acoustic frequency, then just how fragile is the reality we experience every day? We pride ourselves on our objective view of the universe, believing that the ticking of our watches reflects an absolute, unshakable truth. But the moment the brain matches the geometry of an ancient sound wave, that truth dissolves like mist. We begin to realize that our obsession with linearity is a symptom of a deeply fragmented modern psychology. We live in a state of perpetual chronological anxiety, forever haunted by past regrets and driven by future expectations. This fragmentation isolates us from the true depth of existence. By clinging to the linear illusion, we trap ourselves in a one-dimensional narrative, moving along a track we cannot leave, watching life happen to us in fragments rather than experiencing it as a unified whole. The ancient frequency acts as a solvent for this psychological rigidity. It does not add new information to your mind. Rather, it subtracts the artificial constraints that keep you blind to a larger reality. It is an invitation to step off the track entirely. When the frantic pacing of neural activity is quieted by the steady weight of the tone, the illusion of separation falls away, revealing a profound hidden pattern that underlies both human consciousness and the cosmos. If we look closely at the natural world, we see that nature does not operate on timelines. It operates on cycles and harmonies. The seasons return, the stars rotate, and the cells of our bodies expand and contract in rhythmic waves. Linear time is an anomaly, a human invention born of our need to organize factories, schedules, and economies. The universe itself speaks in the language of frequency and vibration. When we tune our awareness to this foundational resonance, our relationship with existence undergoes a radical shift. The panic of running out of time begins to seem absurd. If the past is not truly gone, and the future is already here, then the pressure to constantly race toward the next moment vanishes. We are freed from the exhausting weight of our personal histories and the paralyzing fear of our unknown endings. We find ourselves standing in a space of immense, unshakable stillness. Yet, this transformation raises an even deeper mystery. If the ancient sound frequency can dissolve the illusion of linear time, what happens to the human identity when time is gone? Who are we when we can no longer define ourselves by where we have been or where we are going? To confront the vanishing of time is to witness the collapse of the ego itself. The human identity, as we typically understand it, is not a static object. It is a story. It is a fragile narrative constructed by stringing together a sequence of memories, choices, and future projections. We tell ourselves who we are based on what we did yesterday and what we hope to achieve tomorrow. But when the steady, unyielding pulse of the ancient frequency hums through the nervous system, that entire structural sequence fractures. If you take away the timeline, the story breaks. Without a past, you have no failures to regret, no traumas to carry, and no heritage to claim. Without a future, you have no ambitions to chase, no anxieties to manage, and no death to fear. In the intense clarity of this synchronized acoustic state, the ordinary self simply evaporates. What remains is not a void, but a vast, anonymous presence, an awareness that exists entirely outside of historical context. This psychological dissolution mirrors one of the most profound concepts in modern theoretical physics, the idea of a timeless universe. In the formulations of quantum mechanics, particularly when scientists attempt to unify quantum theory with general relativity, using the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, the variable for time completely disappears from the mathematical framework. To the universe at its deepest layer, time is not an active agent or a flowing river. It is a static geometry. Everything that ever was and everything that ever will be is frozen in a single infinite block of reality. When human consciousness entrains with a fundamental acoustic frequency, it appears to shift its perspective from inside the timeline to outside of it. It is the difference between being a character trapped inside a single frame of a film and being the observer who can look at the entire strip of celluloid laid out on a table. From this vantage point, your birth, your current breath, and your eventual departure are not distant events separated by decades. They are coexisting features of a singular landscape. This creates an intense, beautiful paradox that early human mystics spent lifetimes trying to articulate. If your entire life exists simultaneously, then you have never actually lost anything. The childhood home that was torn down years ago, the loved ones who have passed away, the moments of pure joy that slipped through your fingers, they are not gone. They are simply located at different coordinates within the eternal architecture of the universe. The sound frequency does not bring them back. It brings you back to the realization that they never truly left. Yet, if this timeless reality is the baseline of the cosmos, why does our daily life feel so intensely sequential? The answer lies in a biological necessity known as the evolutionary compromise. If our consciousness remained permanently expanded across all moments at once, we would be entirely non-functional in the physical world, a creature that perceives its birth and its death as the same moment cannot navigate a landscape, forage for food, or avoid predators. Thus, the human brain evolved to act as a reducing valve. It deliberately constricts our vast, multidimensional awareness into a narrow, linear slit. It creates the illusion of the passing present moment, a tiny, moving spotlight of attention, precisely so we can survive in a world of physical matter. Linear time is a survival strategy, a necessary hallucination programmed into our biology. But because we have forgotten that this linear view is just a tool, we have become its prisoners. We have mistaken the map for the territory. We spend our lives running along the edge of a blade, forever anxious about what lies ahead and burdened by what lies behind, completely unaware that the ground beneath us is infinite. The ancient resonance functions as a temporary override of this evolutionary compromise. It gently forces the reducing valve of the brain to open, allowing the vastness of the timeless reality to flood back into our awareness. When the mind glimpses this wholeness, our conventional understanding of cause and effect begins to unravel. We are accustomed to thinking that the past dictates the present, and the present dictates the future. But if time is non-linear, causation becomes a two-way street. Is it possible that the future can reach backward to influence the past? Could the person you are destined to become be subtly pulling your current self toward a specific resonance? When we look at the phenomenon of intuition or sudden, unexplainable creative epiphanies, they often feel less like something we built piece by piece, and more like something we suddenly remembered. It is as if a complete, fully formed truth from a distant coordinate in our life timeline suddenly leaked through the perceptual filter. By utilizing sound to quiet the noisy, sequential tracking of the left hemisphere, we create a quiet space where these retro-causal echoes can finally be heard. This realization shifts our journey from a purely intellectual exploration into a deeply emotional transformation. To look at your life through the lens of the ancient frequency is to experience a profound sense of relief. The desperate urgency that defines modern existence. The feeling that we are constantly running out of time, that we are failing to keep up with an accelerating world, is revealed to be an artificial panic. You cannot run out of something that does not flow. Instead of a frantic race toward a finish line, life reveals itself to be a complex, beautiful tapestry that is already finished, woven with perfect symmetry. Every struggle, every heartbreak, and every triumph is an essential thread in a design that requires every single piece to be whole. We no longer need to fight against the current of time because we realize there is no current. We are the ocean itself, experiencing itself one wave at a time. This leaves us standing at the edge of a radical, practical question. If linear time is a biological filter that can be systematically dissolved through the precise application of sound, how do we live with this knowledge in a world that is entirely built on clocks, schedules, and deadlines? To bridge this timeless expanse with our structured reality, we must look at the hidden language that binds them together: geometry. For centuries, mystics and mathematicians alike have intuited that the universe is built upon a matrix of repeating patterns, a blueprint that manifests equally in the spiral of a galaxy, the structure of a snowflake, and the arrangement of a musical scale. When the ancient frequency echoes through a physical space, it is not merely moving air. It is projecting invisible geometric architectures into the material world. This is beautifully demonstrated by the science of cymatics, the study of visible sound and vibration. When a flat plate covered with fine sand is subjected to specific acoustic tones, the chaotic particles suddenly arrange themselves into exquisite, highly complex geometric patterns. As the frequency changes, the shape shifts, but at certain harmonic intervals, the sand becomes perfectly still, locked into a flawless crystalline mandala. The human body and brain are composed largely of water and fluid crystalline structures. When we immerse ourselves in the ancient resonance, we are essentially subjecting our physical matter to that same geometric ordering. The internal chaos of our frantic, sequential thoughts is forced to conform to a higher, more stable mathematical symmetry. It is a literal retuning of our biology. The sound acts as an invisible scaffold, holding our consciousness in a state of perfect structural equilibrium where the fractured nature of linear perception can no longer sustain itself. This structural alignment reveals a startling connection between historical memory and human architecture. Across the globe, from the megalithic stone circles of Western Europe to the stepped temples of Mesoamerica, we find societies that went to extraordinary lengths to align their physical structures with both acoustic frequencies and astronomical alignments. These templates were not designed merely to track the passage of seasons. They were designed to anchor the human experience to the great cosmic cycles. To the ancient mind, a temple was a device that localized the infinite. By building a structure that resonated at 111 hertz and aligning its axis with the rising of a specific star, they created a physical nexus where the celestial, the terrestrial, and the psychological became indistinguishable. An initiate entering such a space was effectively stepping into a cosmic tuning fork. The architecture stripped away the local, temporary concerns of the historical ego, forcing the individual to vibrate in harmony with the long, slow rhythms of the earth and stars. In our modern isolation, we have severed this connection. We live in boxes of drywall and steel, surrounded by the erratic, high-frequency hum of digital technology, traffic, and industrial noise. This ambient acoustic pollution keeps our nervous systems trapped in a state of perpetual low-grade panic, locking us even tighter into the linear, survival-driven mindset. We are constantly exposed to sounds that fracture our attention, ensuring that we remain disconnected from the deeper, stabilizing geometries of nature. The psychological conflict of the modern seeker is born from this profound dissonance. We sense that we are part of a vast, timeless reality, yet our environments continually demand that we operate as isolated, chronological machines. We are torn between the intuitive memory of our true, infinite nature and the relentless pressure of a society obsessed with speed, production, and decay. The ancient frequency offers a sanctuary from this psychological fragmentation. It serves as a portable temple, an acoustic architecture that we can manifest anywhere, at any time, to override the chaotic frequencies of the modern landscape. By deliberately choosing to commune with this tone, we are not escaping reality. We are reclaiming it. We are choosing to step out of the artificial acceleration of human history and realign ourselves with the profound, unhurried stillness of the cosmic order. This realization transforms our understanding of memory itself. We typically view memory as a filing cabinet of past events, a collection of static snapshots that grow increasingly faint as we move further down the timeline. But when the mind expands under the influence of acoustic resonance, memory reveals itself to be something far more dynamic. It is not a record of what was, but an active tuning into a different coordinate of what is. Just as a radio can tune into different stations that are all broadcasting simultaneously through the air, the human brain can tune into different regions of the eternal timeline. What we call remembering is simply a shift in our internal frequency that allows us to perceive a distant part of our life's complete geometry. The past is not dead. It is merely waiting on a different channel. And if the past is accessible through a shift in resonance, then we must confront the most challenging implication of all. So is the future. This brings us to a dizzying threshold of discovery. If the future already exists as a completed structure within the timeless block of the universe, then the choices we make in the present moment take on a terrifying and beautiful significance. We are not blindly stumbling into an empty, unwritten void. Instead, we are navigating a landscape that is already fully formed, discovering a path that has already been laid down. Our decisions are not acts of raw creation, but acts of alignment. We are choosing which path through the eternal architecture we will embody. When we quiet the frantic, sequential mind through the power of sound, we gain the ability to sense the larger contours of this landscape. We can feel the subtle pull of our destination, allowing us to move through life not with the anxiety of a wanderer lost in the dark, but with the grace of a traveler who finally recognizes the road home. To bring this timeless awareness down from the heights of philosophical abstraction, we must look at how it intersects with the raw mechanics of our daily lives. We live in a world governed by the relentless ticking of the clock, a world of schedules, alarms, and deadlines. It is easy to experience a moment of profound cosmic expansiveness while immersed in a sound frequency, only to feel it instantly shatter the moment we step back onto a crowded city street or open a laptop. The true challenge is not to escape the linear world, but to integrate the timeless perspective into the very heart of it. This integration begins with a radical reassessment of how we experience stress and anxiety. Most human suffering is rooted in a form of temporal displacement. We are either paralyzed by the weight of a past we cannot change, or consumed by anxiety over a future we cannot yet see. When you begin to practice anchoring your consciousness in the foundational resonance of the present, you are effectively introducing a circuit breaker into this psychological loop. In moments of intense daily pressure, the simple mental recollection of that steady, unwavering 111 hertz tone can act as an internal stabilizer. By consciously slowing your breathing to match the rhythm of that deep acoustic stillness, you signal your nervous system to step down from its hyper-focused, sequential survival mode. You do not stop performing your daily tasks. Instead, you change the internal environment from which those tasks are performed. You transition from a state of frantic reaction to a state of calm, deliberate execution. This shift radically alters our relationship with productivity and creativity. In the modern workspace, we are taught that speed is everything, that to achieve more, we must move faster. However, anyone who has ever experienced a state of flow knows that our greatest insights, breakthroughs, and creative leaps do not occur when we are rushing. They happen when we become so deeply absorbed in a task that our sense of self dissolves and time seems to stand still. The flow state is, in essence, a naturally occurring timeless state. By utilizing the ancient frequency as a tool for environmental design, playing it softly in the background of your workspace, or using it to center your mind before beginning a project, you are intentionally inviting that flow state to manifest. You are opening the reducing valve of the brain just enough to allow intuitive insights from the larger architecture of your life to filter through. You stop trying to force solutions through raw, sequential logic and instead allow the complete picture to reveal itself. Furthermore, this perspective completely transforms how we relate to the people around us. When we view life through a strictly linear lens, we tend to see others as obstacles or competitors moving along the same narrow track, competing for a scarce amount of time and resources. But when we look at our relationships from the viewpoint of a completed cosmic tapestry, we realize that the people who cross our paths are not random disruptions. They are essential coordinates in our life's geometry. Conversations cease to be merely a means to an end. They become deep, resonant encounters. When you are fully present with another human being, untethered from the anxiety of what you need to do next, or the judgment of what happened before, you create a rare space of profound listening. You are no longer just interacting with the surface of their historical ego. You are recognizing the timeless presence within them. This is the root of true empathy and authentic human connection. Ultimately, integrating the ancient frequency into the real world means learning to live with a foot in both realms. We must remain capable of reading the clock to meet a friend at noon, while simultaneously remembering that the noon hour is just a tiny, moving spotlight on an infinite canvas. We use the linear illusion to organize our physical movements, but we anchor our identity in the timeless truth of our awareness. When you live this way, the fear of aging and the mourning of lost time lose their grip on your psychology. Every age you have ever been, every person you have ever loved, and every version of yourself you have ever manifested remains perfectly preserved within the eternal fabric of the cosmos. You are no longer a victim of time, being carried helplessly toward an unknown end. You are the deliberate explorer of a magnificent, completed masterpiece, experiencing its beauty one breathtaking coordinate at a time. We return at last to the sensory deprivation chamber, to the quiet dark where our journey began. But you are no longer the same person who stepped inside. The frantic ticking of the internal clock has stopped. The illusion of the timeline has collapsed, and the boundaries of your ordinary identity have dissolved into the immense, unwavering weight of the tone. You are no longer watching your life slip away from you in fragments. You are standing at the center of its completed, eternal architecture. This is the final transformation. The ancient sound frequency does not offer an escape from reality, but a profound homecoming. It strips away the artificial anxiety of a modern world built on watches and schedules, revealing that you are not a helpless wanderer being dragged toward an unknown end. You are the universe experiencing itself, one beautiful coordinate at a time, woven into a tapestry where nothing is ever lost, and every moment coexists forever. As you step back into the brilliant noise of the physical world, the clocks will continue to tick, and the schedules will still demand your attention. But you carry the stillness of the temple within you. You can look at the passing minutes and smile, knowing they are just a temporary, necessary hallucination. You have looked upon the infinite block of reality, and you are finally free. If the passing of time is merely a filter designed to help us survive, what other illusions have we mistaken for the truth?